Welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, there's a strong feeling of deja vu. This is a conversation we had last year. We were hoping that we won't have to have this conversation again. But again, it is exam time. It is college admissions time. And we are again heading towards another lockdown. Not to really raise the alarm, but there is a graded lockdown on. And, we have to be more careful. And schools are really the first casualty. We've already had the class 10 exams being cancelled. The class 12 exams have been postponed. No date has really been set. Because how can you set a date when you don't know what's going to happen? How will this impact college admissions abroad and within India? And also, it's been 1 year of online education. How has that been taken with the students? So I have with me a panel of education counselors and school principals with me and people on the board of directors of schools. So we're going to be taking a look at all these questions, key questions that really concern Gen Next. Joining me is Manju Balasubramaniam. She's the principal of DPS Bangalore North. Anjali Raghavir, she is the founder of the overseas education consultancy Writers Key that guides students who want to study abroad with their college applications. Lakshmi Iyer, executive director and head of education at Sanam S4, which consults international universities in their global operations. Rustam Kerawala, he is the chairman Ampersand Group and Vibgyor Schools. Ruchika Bhardwaj, she is the director at DPS Chhatarpur in Madhya Pradesh. So really, Anjali, we've had this conversation earlier also. So how is this going to affect admissions abroad, really? Because we had a lot of deferred education admissions from last year. So that is pending. We don't know when the class 12 exams are going to be held. How is that going to impact?
So I think there are two questions in that. So deferred admissions would impact the intake of this year. So the trend we're seeing is that a lot of students are getting offers which are for Jan 22. So people are actually getting offers which are delayed by 6 months rather than taking them in September of 2021. So I think deferred admissions are being, impacted in that way. As far as your question for how are, the postponement of the board exams going to impact admissions abroad, they require the sort of like a conditional offer. They give a conditional offer based on the boards. So if the boards are postponed, then how does that, how do you decide which students to take in? And the other thing that UK does is they do a clearing in June, where they allow you to sort of, students who've not applied or students who want to still try to better universities, they can go into clearing. Now, that all depends on the board results. So again, that will be impacted. As far as the US goes, I don't think there's much of an impact because they don't give conditional offers. They require it at some point, which I'm sure, the Indian government will do the boards at some point. So yeah, so that's how it will impact admissions abroad.
Lakshmi, what would be your advice to students sitting in class 12 right now, and who want to study abroad? Is there any countries that you would say are easier or, in terms of the pandemic rules, or what is the situation that they are facing?
Thank you, Priya, for having me. So it's an extraordinary situation, right? 12 months ago, when I think it was approximately 12 months ago, we all kind of got together and spoke about it. And we thought, okay, we all ran into 2021 thinking that this is going to be the year when everything is kind of resolved for us. And here we are in a tsunami of COVID. Now, the challenge is, there are two things that we need to look at. One is the impact on the undergrad student, and the other one is the impact on the grad student. Undergrad students, as Anjali mentioned, with the postponement of the 12th standard examinations for CBSE, some of the state boards are continuing with their exams and so on. But with CBSE students, the challenge is going to be that they will not have their results in hand for the September intake anywhere. Having said that, US and UK have actually kind of dealt with the pandemic in a better way than Canada or the Southern Hemisphere destination countries like Australia and New Zealand, who have really shut their borders and are not going to be open till early 2022 for any kind of visitors. And especially international students have been deprioritized by both these countries, sadly. Now, for graduate students, firstly, If they don't get their results in time, at least the ones who are in their final year degree programs, if they don't get their results in time, then there is no hope that they will be able to leave the country towards the end of the year. So then they will have to ideally look at January, February 2022 intakes. There are also the challenges around many of the embassies and high commissions being very slow to process, because some of them have again shut their doors because of the rise in cases. And as you would have seen, New Zealand, for example, for the first time shut the doors on just visitors from India as India went into a red country status. Now, the biggest challenge that we have in front of us is if some of these countries start saying that because India has not been able to control the second wave, we will not open our borders till such time the COVID surge abates. So then that would then kind of, even if the students are ready to go, they won't be able to leave the country. So there is the pressure on all of the foreign posts here to process the visas on time. They have the backlog that they have got from last year. The slow rollout of vaccines within their own borders. So for example, Canada has not really rolled out the vaccine in an aggressive fashion as UK or US have done. And Australia and New Zealand have just not even kind of started making a dent on this despite the size of their population, because they have been taking a very, very slow wait and watch policy, being extremely careful to the pendulum is actually kind of swung the other way with these two countries. So there are going to be challenges, and I do think that compared to the 750,000 numbers usually that leave India, this year we will be seeing a trickle because of a lot of factors.
Okay. Now, Mr. Kherawala, look at the situation, also 1 year of COVID education, and also you've been, I think the Ampersand Group has schools all over Maharashtra, if I'm not wrong, and that's one of the states that's really the hardest hit. What is the situation like on ground over there?
So as you mentioned, yeah, situation is bad, and we have been hit hard. And I think it's not just Maharashtra, but quite a few other states. So we've gone through online education last year, and I guess that's how we are going to continue with it this year. Fortunately, I guess last year it took us by surprise. So it took quite some time for the entire ecosystem to adjust to it and adapt to it. This time, I think everybody's quite prepared. They've now had 6 to 9 months of experience with dealing with it. And so I think we are far, far better prepared as compared to last year. Nevertheless, nothing beats the physical schools functioning. But this is how the circumstances
are. What about board exams in Maharashtra? Is same situation as...
I think they would follow if they have not already followed the same situation. I don't see any other way.
Ruchika, you're from an area that is, more the Chhatarpur in Madhya Pradesh, more rural than the others. So it's been interesting to see how this online system has worked for you over there, for your school.
So Priya, I mean, initially when we started, of course, we were all very nervous and we didn't know how we were going to cope up with, because not only challenges within the infrastructure of our school as simple as laptops and, working from home environment. But what was challenging was connectivity. But having said that, I mean, I'm very happy to say that the urban-rural divide has been lessened quite a bit online in these last 6 to 9 months. Because we have quickly learned the art of online education. There have been plethora of resources available out there for us that we have had the access and acceptability by the parents and the teachers to use those. Earlier, there was a resistance. Now, willingly, everybody wants to know how can we do something online which can be something different. So, yes, it's been challenging, and you cannot take physical school away. But I'm also thankful that because our children had started coming, the senior school children had started coming. So we got that window to connect back with our students. So I'm thankful for a little bit for that happened for about 2 months. Rural India is not yet, at least the area that I am, is not so badly or rising so sharply, but it is under complete lockdown because it's part of that whole state policy. So it's under complete lockdown. And it is challenging. I mean, now for this year onwards, I don't see this year also is going to be pretty much online. I don't see it coming back physical, school coming back on campus. So yeah, I mean, it's been a learning curve, and I'm happy, but all our budgets went into IT. And I see that this year also, that's what we should do. And everybody, I'm sure, is doing the same thing. And I really, my sincere appeal to government, CBSE, is that we have to strengthen our IT now. Online exams have to become a reality of some sort.
Manju, how do, in terms of class 12, even Bangalore, I think, has postponed the class 12 boards. How are the students reacting to that? What are their apprehensions? What are they going to do about the admissions?
The feelings are mixed. While some of them feel a decision similar to 10th should have been taken, and the uncertainty of the examination is taken away, because it just prolongs. The longer it takes, the uncertainty grows. So students are concerned, the class 12 students, but like Lakshmi said, the numbers of children applying to go abroad has diminished considerably. Because even the ones who did get admission last year, had an option of doing it from India. And then the whole idea of why should I pay a bomb to go to study in a country where I can't even have the feel of a university. So that was a big deterrent, and a large number of students this year have decided to stay back. So we've had very few applications as well. For this, within the state, I think the country as a whole is facing, and Karnataka has a number of engineering colleges and medical colleges. So that is still going to stay. And I think most parents and students will apply for colleges in India. That's what I see it coming up.
Anjali, what happens when they apply in India? The number of colleges are the same. I know you're dealing a lot with the Ashoka University also. So where are these students going to apply? Because, there's going to be a shortage of space seats.
Yes, absolutely. There is a huge shortage. And I think Ashoka, there are lots of new institutes like Plaksha for engineering, there's Flame, there's Kriya, there's Ashoka. I think these new schools are also sort of, now in the conversation with students. Earlier, nobody would even look at these universities, but these are very few and far between. I think the pressure on DU, Delhi University, Mumbai University, all the sort of, the traditionally where students applied, those are going to be inundated, and I'm sure percentages are going to skyrocket, the cutoffs. So I really don't know what it, will be like. Let's see how 2021 pans out.
Other countries, Lakshmi, that you would say that people should go in for? You said, Australia, Canada have not this thing. Or how would you tell people to take a sabbatical a year? That's what we were discussing last time. But, how many sabbaticals can someone take?
Yeah, very good question, Priya. Taking off on the points that Manju and Anjali just made. I do think that thanks to the sudden tabling of the National Education Policy in July 2020, there are other paradigms of higher education that have suddenly become more acceptable. We have seen the possibilities of technology, where there are programs which do not require lab facilities and lab access. I think parents and students and educators are more open to considering programs delivered by OPMs. So these are, online program managers that work extensively with universities to put their programs, online and make those programs, not as just, a few posts on the web, but really interactive and interesting, and offer in some ways an enabled learning environment. So I think we would see many students kind of, starting to look at these kinds of programs. Earlier, if you look at the likes of Coursera or edX, they have always attracted individuals who have kind of completed a first degree and were actively looking to upskill themselves. But now that is going to kind of become more prevalent in, school leavers. And also individuals who are looking at kind of pursuing a degree. And, in this context that we also have to bear in mind that organizations like Google are suddenly going around and saying that, you really don't need to go to a college. You can take 2 or 3 certifications of ours and we will give you an analyst job. And that in itself, strikes at the heart of what university education, has stood for all these years. And what COVID is doing is to really accelerate these kinds of changes in how we deliver education and how learners learn. So, and as educators, as people who work in higher education and also skill-based education, because suddenly the importance of having people who are skilled, that is kind of, assuming a lot more importance than earlier, where it was just a straightforward degree and then, you get to do a job. But it's no longer like that. And the other bigger challenge that, educators will face is that the plethora of choices that are now available in terms of, programs that people can do sat at home and get a credential. How do you figure out what credential is good, what credential is not so great? And if someone comes to you with a stack of credentials saying, okay, these are all the things that I sat and did over 15 months of lockdown, and what are the outcomes? How are educators going to kind of figure that out and enable their access to further education if they choose to do so? So there are a whole bunch of other issues that we are not even kind of, we don't have the mental space to process, but they are looming ahead of us. So in terms of countries, we know that the UK, much as, the initial response and the deaths in UK really scared individuals, the way they have, accelerated, vaccinated at scale and at pace, and they have really changed the tide within the country and have kept their borders open. So students who have chosen to go to the UK, despite the fact that they might not be able to go into campus and so on, have decided that they will sit in their bedsit and study, because at least they are in the same time zone, because that is another big challenge for students who are choosing to study with American or Canadian institutions or even British universities, because of time zone differences. And and that is more acute in the case of North American institutions because of the 10.5 to 12.5 hour difference. It can become a health challenge for students. Console themselves saying, okay, 1 year I can somehow pull on. But if it is going into the second year, the stickiness of students to such programs is also becoming problematic.
I think very good points raised, Lakshmi. Especially, I like the one that, are we now looking at the old ways of education? Are we really looking at it? It's now skill-specific diplomas that are taking priority over the traditional degree. That's something I'm going to put to the panel. Mr. Kherwal, can you take from Lakshmi's point, are we now, will students or even schools start focusing on skill-specific? Are we taking a shortcut really in education system, and these hyped-up degrees are going to be soon losing their value? Do you see that happening?
So I think definitely there has to be a shift, and there is going to be a shift. In fact, even the National Education Policy has spoken about it, and the credit system. So I guess evolution is going to happen. The entire COVID phenomenon is acting as a catalyst for that. So the shift is, and especially now when you're talking and comparing it to degrees, and if you look at NEP, it talks about multidisciplinary learning, multidisciplinary credits, creating a more holistic individual, even at the higher education levels, which were words that were used and only in the schooling system. So I guess, this shift is definitely going to happen. A lot of blended learning is going to happen, and the internet and online platforms are going to be a norm and contribute. And I think that's a good thing. We should be able to reach out to far many people at a far lower cost, and education will be far more democratized as compared to what it is now.
That's a good point. In fact, I remember someone commenting on social media, on Twitter, that the only use for a class 10 certificate is that it actually certifies our date of birth. So those people who don't have a birth certificate, it helps. Otherwise, there's no really use for that. So, Ruchika, do you see this, if you take this line of argument further?
Priya, to a degree, yes, I do agree. The class 10th for a school, it is basically an assessment tool to see which stream the student wants to go to. But if our education system was more aligned to multidisciplinary, as Rustom also mentioned, then it would be an ongoing assessment. We wouldn't have the need to do a 10th board to see where a child or a student would land up in grade 11. And it should be a decision not based out of a one solo exam, but it should be a decision based out of a continuous comprehensive evaluation, which CBSE had started doing some work towards. But we still have a long way. And in rural India, it is a challenge because not only do the people policies don't need to be decided, people need to be trained. And mindsets need to be changed. Parents don't understand that yet in very heart of India. And they need to understand that it's not about the percentage, but it's going to be online. It's going to be an ongoing assessment. It's going to be, it is a challenge. It's an uphill challenge. But yes, you can't now turn back the clock. It is going to happen. It's a matter of time. And these COVID times has accelerated the process, which is very good.
What about the teachers, Ruchika? You're training the students, but you hinted that the mindset change. How were the teachers taken to the online education? They also must have had a problem struggling with the computer, the PowerPoint presentations, etc.
Absolutely, Priya. When we started, teachers who had always had a hesitation towards technology, saying, "Ma'am, I can't do it. I'm technologically challenged," actually was so fast to pick up, and now they're doing their own bank transfers. They're handling their bank accounts. So it shows that they became students very fast. And they learned it very fast. But it's about the infrastructure and the support that one gets. So I can say that, school, community, the atmosphere in general has to really be supportive for that teacher learning skills to be upgraded. It is a difficult task, but nevertheless, I can see a lot of people have managed well.
This whole re-looking at education in the last year, what are the changes that you have seen apart from, everybody getting more technologically savvy?
So Priya, I'd like to go with all stakeholders who are committed to the cause of education, the student, the teacher, and the parent. I think never before in the history of learning and in mankind have all three been together when learning was happening. Initially, last March, April, there were issues. There were parents snooping into the classrooms, being very critical of the teachers not very sure about technology. But as time passed, each realized and started appreciating one another. So I had a number of parents coming in to chip in with technology, students helping teachers, and parents becoming very appreciative of the classrooms that had turned very for the family. I had a number of parents coming and telling me, I wish we were in school again. Your teachers make so much of a difference. I know of children who've written back into me, email me saying, we really appreciate this teacher who'd gone into rural India so that her baby could be managed. And she was taking her class from a little hut, but she was using her mobile device. And this is a DPS teacher, right? She needed family support, so went back to her village, but was using her remote to learn, to teach, and the classes happened perfectly well. So this appreciation of one another's work, I think, really is the plus point of the pandemic. When I speak to my colleagues across India, in different parts of India, people in Delhi rural schools tell me how much learning has become self-motivated. Children have seen so much of a crisis, especially in parts of the world where both parents have lost their jobs. Getting a device was difficult. You had to manage with whatever you had with 4 siblings. The heightened crisis became a forerunner for self-motivation. And many kids felt that probably because their parents were not so educated, they've lost their jobs. And so they want to learn. In Rajasthan, a colleague of mine told me yesterday that teachers have gone beyond PPTs. It's no more about PPT and a platform. It's about creating apps that are user-friendly for your children. So there is a beautiful Sanskrit app that's come up that enables without a textbook. And this is Imran Khan, he is a national award-winning teacher in Rajasthan, who's created a Sanskrit app for children. And 50,000 children have got onto the app and they're doing so amazingly well. Another Fulbrighter in rural Andhra Pradesh is using social media. She's using Facebook and Twitter to reach out to her students. A village in Kerala is using virtual reality, is using Alexa in the classroom. And so when the lockdown opened, children started rushing into the classroom to speak with Alexa and to learn English. This wouldn't have happened if it was a regular school year. And like all the panelists before me, this has opened opportunities of learning like never before.
Well, new experiences, new challenges, and also new ways to overcome these challenges. And that the field of education is really where it all begins. Thank you all for sharing your experience and your perspective with us. And thank you all for watching this show. I hope you took away from it the same takeaway that I have. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.